right, let's see if this one does it. All right, now it says I'm live. Look at that. I guess it's working now. First message I got, folks, was live stream is not working this morning. And now it's on. So welcome to It's Sunday on my YouTube channel. And let me just say that I'm really tired this morning. I don't know what it is. My whole body feels absolutely sore and stiff, and my brain has not yet cleared up despite the 2 cups of coffee I've had in the last couple of hours. And I feel like I'm still half asleep. So, it says in 11 hours. Oh, you know what? I wonder if I set it for 9 p.m. instead of 9 a.m. Dough. You know, every time I set my reminders for the daily show, Monday through Friday, I have to set them for 9 p.m. I wonder if I accidentally set this for 9 p.m. Well, there it is. We're live. So no matter what it says, we're here. So good morning, everybody. And happy Easter for those of you celebrating Easter. And I certainly don't not celebrate Easter. But I'm in the midst of that what you would call existential crisis when it comes to Easter and understanding, as most of you know, when you've listened to my shows, when I've talked about the history of Christianity, I start to take that stuff on very personally. And when I think of all the ramifications of the possibility that everything we once believed about Jesus and the resurrection and salvation and so on is really part of the greater mysteries, the Gnostic mysteries, and that it wasn't recognized as being a literal thing for almost 300 years after the death of life and death of Jesus Christ, that you start to wonder, is Easter what we've made it out to be in Christianity? We could celebrate the life and the death and the burial and the resurrection of Jesus, but did that have salvific qualities? Did it have grace that was given to us? Was it for the sins of mankind? Or was that something that was added afterward? And that's a tough place to be in because, and maybe some of you struggle with the same thing. Maybe we go through the rituals and the practices and traditions of celebrating Easter without contemplating whether or not it is real. And so that is where I get a little hung up sometimes, especially nowadays. And when I say I take that on personally, it's because it's become a thing where I can't just do it and celebrate it by rote anymore. Hey, it's Easter time. So, hey, happy Easter, everybody. He has risen. He has risen indeed. Was the answer the statement and the answer that we always had. I look at my kids this morning rummaging around for hidden Easter baskets. Now, I'm pretty sure the 10-year-old knows there's not such a thing as an Easter bunny. But the little ones are still, the 8-year-old still, she's getting it. And I think she already knows. She just likes to play along. And, of course, the 5-year-old is all about the Easter bunny. The Easter bunny and Santa Claus, they might as well be the same thing as God in her book, because there's no difference. They're the unseen. The only difference is that Santa and the Easter bunny actually give you physical things. So we go through the practices and the traditions, the holiday aspect of it all. But where are you guys on this? For me, having been deeply entrenched in theology, coming out of the church, Even after I left the faith, so to speak, I had people say, "Well, what do you do about Jesus?" I said, "I don't touch that one. I can't throw out the baby with the bathwater." And so it took me a long time, and even now I have a lot of reverence in my heart for Jesus. But how true is the religion, the spirituality? Now, was he crucified? Was he entombed? I think those are historical facts we could probably go along with. Not a lot of proofs for them, but they're out there. Historical proofs that he lived his life and these deeds took place. The big question is, what did his followers add after the fact? Did he resurrect? Was that part of the mystery, mystery teaching? That, like all the other messiahs who had come before him, he was revered or elevated to the position to match what they were, all the deeds of their lives, all the burial, the communing with the saints, as the Bible says, but communing with the souls in Sheol, in um, Hades, it was the other word I was looking for, and then resurrecting from life, back to life. So there are the big questions that surround Easter for me. I have a lot of head knowledge, of course, because of the years I spent in theological training, and in ministry and in faith education. And it was a very real thing for me. So the time comes now where I have to contemplate these things and I don't know where I am on it. And so I don't know if you are like me. Maybe you don't have all the trappings around the way you believe things like I do. Out of my experience is what I mean. My experience is different than your experience. But maybe on some level, you say, we do all these things and we don't really know the answers. We don't even know if there's truth there. We can say, "Oh, I feel it, I believe it, I know it." Um, but and I don't wish to offend anybody or their sensibilities, but we can get those feelings about Santa Claus too. I know he's real. Santa, I know him. So, there's the big question that comes into my mind about all of this stuff. And I wonder if you question it too. And questioning is an okay thing to have. I have always thought that if it was as real as we were taught it was, theologically, we'd have more than something that was written in a book 2,000 years ago. Um, and then I look at other spiritualities and other things that I talk about mystery language. I talk about being aware, being awake, being in the now, all of those things. And those all require amounts of faith as well. So I think the big question is, what faith do you subscribe to? Where do you put your faith? What do you put your faith in? And I want to believe is the thing. I wish it were so. But, and you would think that somebody who has been so steeped in the education of these things, the theological research, the personal faith for so many years, that the wanting to would bring it into reality. And I have often questioned God, not knowing if he is there hearing this, but asking, do you really hear me? Are you really there? Is this what really happened? Do you bend your ear to your servants? Do you show the proofs that we ask? Or on the other hand, comes the answer back in my head. I'm imagining what God might say is that, hey, I gave you all information already. You don't get it yet? Why do I have to do something special for you? Believe it or don't believe it. And so there is the big question that starts to plague me. And let's come back and we'll talk about this more. But I want to say some good mornings here because I skipped right over that. And Susie Q, how you doing? You were the first one in here. Good to see you. Happy Easter to you. Matt Finn, good to see you, my young daddy. And how's the young boy doing? How's the wife doing? Congrats again to you. And let's see who else we got in here. That was the very earliest. Teresa, good to see you. And Patch, nice to see you. Hi, Easter bunnies. He says, I'm hungry. And Rocky Stucci, how you doing, brother? Good to see you here this morning. Jim Dawson, good to see you, brother. Glad you're here. Roger Rabbit, glad you're here as well, Roger. Hope you're doing well. And how's that Carly doing? And Chad Sanders, good to see you, brother. And I'm going down the list here. I'm just seeing everybody saying good morning. Sexy as hell, bro, says Rocky Stucci. I know you're talking about me, brother. My eyes aren't even open yet. I've been awake for hours, and I just feel like my body will not wake up today. So, let's see. Let's move on in here. Steph, Cuervo Queen. Steph, you are my Cuervo Queen. I just want to say that when I see Cuervo, you want to start talking like Zorro. So, I don't like tequila, by the way. I just have to say. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Sean Bowden, nice to see you in here this morning. Everybody still just saying good morning. Happy. Chase Corrington, nice to see you in here. And TC, good to see you as well. If I had my glasses on, just trying to see. So Mary Mansfield, good morning, Mary. Good to see you in here again. And KT Emma, how you doing? And so we're getting close. I'm getting closer. We are. Field Guy, nice to see you this morning. Greetings, yawns, he says. And I'm looking to see if anybody's got any comments yet, or if it's all just the niceties, the good mornings, the happy Easters, the things of that nature. And I don't want anybody to ever feel that you can't express what you believe. And so you want to say happy Easter, say happy Easter. I come from the position of saying I study a lot of things, but know nothing for sure. So there I am. Sean Bowden, good to see you. And Barbara Donica, nice to see you this morning. Chocolate coated delusion, distortion, and distraction. There you go. The 3 Ds of Easter or of chocolate bunnies. So moving on. I just want to make sure I hit y'all while you're here. That's what we do. That's what we do on Sunday. We're live today, so I don't have to do radio type stuff. I can do. Imagine if I said hi to everybody on the radio show, we'd have no time for the show. Audrey, good to see you out there on the left coast. How's life out there? Is it snowing there like it is here? It was 70 effing degrees here yesterday. I'm just saying. We were out in the sun. We were doing stuff out in the yard most of the afternoon. And this morning it's snowing. So they're predicting a winter storm front coming through and the possibility of anywhere from 9 to 13 inches being dumped on us tonight of snow. So at least we had our 70-degree day yesterday. Those of you who live up here, there was our summer. So Leslie, good morning. How you doing? Thank you again, Leslie, for your support. I appreciate that. And Matt, too, for what you sent in. And who else? I don't have it in front of me here. So it'll come to me in a minute. Somebody else sent something with Matt, too. And Leslie, thank you guys. That helps. It all goes in the coffers to keep this show alive. And, well, the truth is, I'd probably still do it either way, but what you do helps. It's a nice little shot in the arm. I appreciate that. Devaney Delight. Good to see you, Delaney Jones. And let's see. Anything else going on? In the morning, not on screen. I'm not sure what you meant there, Kay, unless I go backwards and find out what people are saying. Susie Q says, Jesus is my brother. I do not worship him. I love him. I was born divine, sovereign, and free, and I'm a goddess. Well, there you go, Susie Q. And let's see. Gary Baxter, good to see you. Gary says, when I did his mini 3-card read about a month and a half ago, you said I was in for a big change. You had no idea, buddy. Uh-oh. Well, share what you can here. If you can't share it, let me know. I'd be interested to know. So, glad that worked out. If it worked out. Let's see. Going on out here in the West Coast, says Audrey. We had our first sunny day yesterday after 4 days of this clear, wet stuff falling from the skies. Yeah, it's nice you get some rain in California, huh? And so there, I think we're caught up with everybody. So it's good to see y'all. Carly, there you go. There you are. How you doing? And boom. So there we are. So I appreciate some of you, expressing your thoughts on this and what you think about it. You can see I'm slow as molasses. I was going to say something else, but that's how I talk. I talk rough. I'm a rough man, and I say rough words in rough ways. Oh, I couldn't help but say that. I remember there was a kid in college once, and he was probably, and this is based thoroughly on externals, the way he looked, the way he dressed, well, and it was the way he acted too. You would put him very stiffly and firmly into the nerd category. And he was a strange fellow. And he was from Montana, if I remember right, or Wyoming, one of the two. And he wore his cowboy boots all the time, and he kind of talked like that, and we overheard him walking through campus with a girl. I don't know if they were out on a date or if he was trying to pick her up. But as we passed them, we don't know the context of anything else he was saying. He was coming in our direction, and we were going this way down the sidewalk. And all I remember hearing him say was, and he gave almost a Barney Fife type of sniff. Yep. He says, yep, grew up fast, had to. And he kept going. And we were just like, oh, it kept everything in the world for us to not interfere in their conversation. But, and so that's what I meant when I say naughty words sometimes because I'm a rough, tough man. Yeah, and I swear. And I got a nose full. It was a joke, folks. A joke. So, let's see. Let's see what else is. The gloves arrived, but I haven't given them to Kins yet. Might have to today. Oh, okay. That's Carly. All right. What else we got going on here? Excuse my yawning. I'm yawning. Look at look at my face. Look at my eyes. That's how I feel today. I'm totally dragged down today. I might have something to do with kids being scared of something, and everybody was in the bed last night. Now, I had the small child up, curled. She kept moving, and her hand would hit my head or a foot or something, and the boy was there, and He was curled up on the floor with pillows and a comforter, and Rainy's in the bed on the other side of the little girl, and then there's the other girl, the 8-year-old, all curled up. And I think it was about 3 a.m. I got up and I came down here, and I curled up on the sofa for a little bit, but I've been up, so I cannot emphasize enough how draggy I feel today. So Roger Rabbit would like to announce that his coffee is almost ready, so his day is now phenomenal. Oh, here's to that, brother. Cheers. Here. So, what do you want to talk about today? I've already started it off. I've kicked it off with a few thoughts about Easter, and I am always taken by the historical events that were supposed to happen around Easter, and we've talked about a few of those things before. Let's see, Bernard. Haha, bloody oath, mate. Grew up fast. Yeah, there it is. I know what you mean. Been up, Scotty. Hot piss quit 5 years, but I sounded crazy 10 years now. Wow. Leaders need forgiveness. I researched Mother Kaya. Okay, I think I'm deciphering bits and pieces out of that, brother. So it's good to see you here, though, in the chat. We rarely see you in the chat room, Bernard. So let's see. Double history. Yeah, I look at that history, and I see things that are definitely historical. I look at, and I've talked about all these things before. Pontius Pilate, the existence of Pilate. Did he really exist? And they claimed he was part of the Jesus myth because there was no archaeological evidence that he ever existed until they unearthed the cornerstone with his inscription in Caesarea Philippi back in the 60s. And Caesarea Philippi was the seat of the Roman governorship of Judea, and at the time in the 1st century. And so that's where they found his cornerstone on what would have been dedicating a gymnasium to Tiberius Caesar. That's pretty interesting. And where they found it was they found they weren't even looking for that. They had uncovered an old stairway that dated back into the 1st to the 2nd century. No, it's probably 2nd or 3rd century. And as they uncovered that, they found built into the stairway used stone. And one of the used stones was this cornerstone with the inscription of Pontius Pilate. It says right on it, clear as day, Pontius Pilatus Praefectus Idue. And then some other things in there. Now that stone sits in the Jerusalem Museum, and you can go see that, or you can look up pictures of it. So I can't really show you on here, so I'm not in the right program. Otherwise, I'd show you some photos of it. But there's that history. Do I think Jesus really suffered on the cross? Asked Kay. Yeah, I think he did. I think he was executed by the Roman governor. And of course, you have to look at all that. Why would the Romans want to execute Jesus? What did he do? Anybody here? Do you know what the reason was that Jesus was crucified? What was the reason? Why was he condemned to death? Anybody know? Anybody know the history of that? You can give it a wild guess, a wild stab in the dark if you don't know. If you do know, state why you know that. Why do you think he was? We all know the story. Judas betrayed him to the Sanhedrin, and they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And he betrayed Jesus with a kiss, and Jesus goes through all these trials. Why did they execute him? Why was he put to death? What did he do? Anybody know? We go through our whole lives. Many people go through their whole lives in Christianity believing these things happened, but having no idea why they happened. Nothing about the history behind it or the story, even the backstory. Let's see. I'm looking to see if anybody's got anything. If you don't know, I'll tell you. He had to die to complete the prophecy. I get that part, Matt. You can take that, the fulfillment of prophecy, set that aside. What was the vehicle in motion that brought about his writ of execution and his death? Why did the government execute him? The government didn't go, hey, let's help this dude fulfill prophecy. No, there was reasons behind that. Do you remember what the reasons were that they brought him to trial? I'll let this go on for another minute before I start jumping into it, but I'm just curious if anybody really knew. And there we are. Deception Patch says, yeah, there's part of that in there. Okay, here's the idea. Do you know how much today, look at our own political system, our own government here in America. I know there's some of you here that aren't American, but look at government and look at the way we view government and corporate money and things like that. You want to get in the most trouble in your life, do something that disrupts corporate money, the flow of corporate money. Now, I'm not one of those that's saying all corporations and corporate CEO types are evil. I don't believe that. That's a bunch of nonsense. But when you get in the way of a corporate entity that's working behind the scenes to pull strings, what if you have a whistleblower who pulls the strings and could very possibly get the people to turn against something that has to do with money and the people behind the money? Well, Susie says because he was preaching and healing, doing things they didn't want him to do. Susie Q, to a point. Who were the ones that didn't want him doing that? I know the Pharisees, which was the ruling religious class in Israel or Judea in the first century. They wouldn't be against somebody healing. They wouldn't be against somebody that would do good deeds. Remember, it says that they would come to the gatherings where people would gather to listen to Jesus speak or to have him heal somebody, and they'd be in the audience and they'd throw questions at him. Are you, they'd say, and we always show this as a mocking thing. I don't think they were always mocking. These guys were out there saying, are you Elijah the prophet? Which was a prophetic way of saying the Messiah is coming. They say, are you the chosen one? Are you he? And they would throw questions at him. Then some would throw questions to try to trip him up. Leslie says government doesn't want the competition. Someone like Jesus would have given mankind for worship. They always wanted the almighty power and worship. I think to a point you're pretty close to the mark there, Leslie. I don't think the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the ruling class of the Jews, I don't think that to say that they didn't want competition is probably close to being on the mark. But I think they also didn't believe innately in the prophecies. They didn't believe in the spiritual working. Look at the church today. And I'm building up to the point here, I'm making the case. You look at the church today, how many people in the church do you suppose really believe that God could split open the skies and descend with 10,000 angels if he wanted to? You know, you might have even up to the Pope, you know, in the Catholic Church. You might have people say, well, I believe that. But do they really believe that? Does the hierarchy of the church, do most people who go to church in any religion within Christian denomination under Christianity, do they believe that God is who God says God is? Do they believe that Jesus is who Jesus said he was? or who that his followers said he was. So I think there has to be a little bit of that in that argument, Leslie, to say that Jesus was competition for worship. I don't know that they saw it that way. Here's what I believe they really saw, and I think this is brought forward in the Gospels. I don't think they were like, this guy is the Son of God and he's sent from God and he's going to draw worship away from the temple. No, I don't think they believed that at all. Because what they preached and taught was that the Messiah was going to come someday and fulfill the prophecy. And they were still looking for the Messiah. And then they saw, however, Jesus doing things like, I think the big tipping the scales for him against him was when he cleared out the money changers in the temple. When he saw all the money changers there with their tables, and this is people when they would come to worship at the temple, there was a whole marketplace that was set up where you could buy a sheep or a dove or whatever you needed for sacrifice, and all the different accoutrements to go with it. Prayer shawls, probably, who knows, beads, olfactories, those little boxes that they would strap on. You see it today with devout Orthodox Jews, where they've got the little boxes that have scripture in it and wrapped. I'll bet you they had all of that stuff at these little marketplaces, and this was the money changers. They're the ones who were exchanging the dinero, so to speak. And what did Jesus do? He came in there and he did this twice. We can confuse the two sometimes in the accounts in the Bible. But what did he do? He came in, and it was that last week that he was alive that he did this. Remember, he comes in on Sunday, which would have been like last Sunday, riding the foal of a donkey, and everybody doing the hosannas and all of this. Hail to the King, which we've covered that history. That was all about them thinking he is the Messiah in the sense of he's coming to deliver us from the bondage of Rome. Militarily, he's going to establish a kingdom and raise an army and fight Rome and oust them out of our land, just like Judas Maccabeus had done 100 years earlier in ousting the Persians. And so the palm frond, the Hosanna to the King, that was all a symbol of the Maccabean family, the palm frond. And so he came in on Sunday, and during the week, what did he do? All the people were looking to him, and he clears the money changers out of the temple. He goes into the temple and he says, you've made, remember this in the the scriptural story, he says, you've turned my father's house. No, my father's house is a house of prayer, and you've made it a den of thieves. And he starts kicking over tables, and it says he fashioned a whip out of strands of leather in his hand, and he starts whipping at all these guys, these money changers, the marketplace guys, and he ousts them from the temple single-handedly. Well, I think his disciples helped them too. Maybe his followers started joining in as well. It doesn't say a whole crowd of them started doing this, but it says that he held them out of the temple for 3 days, I think it was. And you know what this did to the Sanhedrin, the ruling class of the Jews, who owned most of these tables of money changers? Those funds went into the temple fund, which in turn supported the priests. It supported the Sadducees. It supported the Pharisees, all this ruling class. All of a sudden, Jesus is telling the people, you don't go to temple for this reason. You don't buy this stuff at temple. You don't give your money to the... And I don't mean this to sound so leftist progressive as it might sound, but he's saying you don't give your money to the corporation here. You give your heart to God. And the Sadducee, it said that they were pretty pissed off with him, and they wanted him gone, because what was he doing? for a building of 3 years, and he had done this once before already at the temple. He was creating a problem for himself in that he was standing against the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, which was the ruling class of the religious ruling class. And so as soon as he went from, maybe they didn't like the fact that he said that he was the Father and I are one, things like that. They didn't understand what he was saying. Remember, we talked about that when we were talking about the mysteries. They may not have liked that. They may not have liked the healing. They may not have liked the attention he was getting. But man, as soon as he started hitting them in the pocketbook in the temple, he's gone. I see Al Capone in the movie The Untouchables. He's dead. He's dead to me. He's dead. I want him dead. I want his disciples dead. I want his followers dead. He's dead. So this is what happened when Jesus disrupted the flow of money coming into the temple. And remember, it wasn't the first time he'd done that. The last week of his life was the second time he'd done that. So there you go. I think that is what started going on. And so they sought to have him killed. And they needed to remove this upstart who had an upstart following. A lot of people were following him. They watched what happened on the Sunday before when Jesus entered the city, and throngs of people, the crowds, were all hailing him as the King of the Jews, all waving the palm fronds and so on. But then what happened in the process? Why did the people all turn on him? There's a couple of things that happened. First, the Sanhedrin wanted him out of the way. He's dead. He's dead. I want him dead and gone. And they, of course, paid Judas the 30 pieces of silver to betray him. And betraying him, well, what was that all about? Why didn't they just walk up and arrest him? I think it's because he may not have been easy to get to. And they may not have recognized him. Remember, this is olden times. It's thousands of years ago. Maybe they didn't recognize him in the street. I don't know what it was, but they had to pay Judas, who would say, I'll take you to where he's going to be. And so the people turned against him when they found that he declared during that week that I'm not here to raise an army. I'm not here to be the king. I am here to present to you the kingdom that's in your heart. And he says, and this is what he was trying to convert hearts. And the people were like, weren't we supposed to see, Rocky, you listening? Weren't we supposed to see a comet or a flash of light with you? Change my heart. And the people lost interest in him because they found out this isn't the guy. Jeremy, I do think that Jesus told Judas to do that. There's one source, and we talked about this in one of my programs a few months back. The Book of Judas, which is one of those books, Gnostic teaching books that was uncovered. And it dates back, almost 2,000 years, this Book of Judas. Like 1,800 years to 1,900 years old. It's a copy of a copy. And in this book, it's got Judas was the one that Jesus took aside. Now you won't find this in the Bible, but you'll find hints in the Bible that Jesus took him aside and said, you're the one who gets the greater mysteries. Actually said that. You get the truest meaning of this. He said, I need you to do something. I need you to betray me. And I don't know what language was used exactly, but Judas was not for this. And Jesus said, you have to do this in order to fulfill prophecy. And then you go to the Bible story as we know it, the Gospels that we have. This was the Gospel of Judas, which obviously didn't make the cut And they didn't even know it existed back when they were canonizing the scripture. And Jesus said, one of you is going to betray me. And they're all the disciples at the dinner were like, is it me, Lord? Am I the one? It's like, shut up, you know, piousness. And Jesus said, the one who dips his bread in the sauce at the same time as I do is going to be the one. He announces it. The one of you that dips your bread in the sauce is going to be the one. And he takes a piece of bread and goes to dip in the sauce, and Judas then dips his bread in the sauce. And it says, and Jesus looked in his eyes and said, the thing that you're appointed to do, go do it. And a lot of people have said, Jesus is talking about Satan ruling the heart of Judas. I think it was a little more practical and down to earth than that. I think it was this conversation that Jesus had with Judas. And Jesus looks at him and says, the thing you're appointed to do, meaning that I've appointed you to do, is go take care of that business. I need you to do this. Judas goes and does his deed. Leslie says, you got to wonder why they saw fit to edit the Gospels rather than including them all. If one is good enough for the Bible, they all should be. Never knew there was a book of Enoch until it's got me. Well, yeah, there were all these books and the Gospels. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John tell us the story of Jesus from slightly different perspectives. But did you know that there were almost 70 Gospels written that all date back to within 100 to 200 years of the time of Jesus? The 4 Gospels that exist now, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those were all written toward the end of the 1st century. Jesus, if he had died between 25 and 35 AD, he was 50 to 60 years before some of these Gospels appeared. And we still don't have any of the original copies of those. Yeah, Judas is a badass. And it said, you know, the thought is that if this is true about him, that he did what Jesus told him to do, the reason he committed suicide was it so overwhelmed him he couldn't handle the burden of what he had done. Not because he was grieved, because he did the act of Satan. And there are conflicting accounts in the Gospels on the death of Judas. One gospel that we have, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the ones that are in the Bible, the accepted ones. One says that he was out surveying a field that he had bought with the 30 pieces of silver, and he stumbles and falls down a small hill or cliff and gashes his body open on the rocks, and his guts spill out and he dies. In one of the other Gospels, there is an account that he went out and hung himself. And so, which one of those two is true, and why do they contradict each other in the accepted Gospels? It's a big question. So, yeah, you've got all these different books that were written that remember when they first started trying to decide which books belonged in the Bible, which were scripture and which weren't. There were many of these Gospels at the time, and I think maybe they did know of the Gospel of Judas, because it all started in the early 300s. You know, you're talking from 26 to 325. Jesus died in around 25 BC. Young man in his early 30s. Would have been around 25 to 26 AD. 300 years later, 325 AD, was when Constantine, the Roman emperor, first Christian quote unquote Roman emperor, convoked the first of the councils, the the Council of Nicaea was the first. And among the things on the agenda was the beginnings of starting to decide which books belonged in the Bible, canonizing the scripture. And over a series of different councils over the years, we came up with the books that we have in the Bible now. And they got rid of all the other books, Book of Enoch, as Leslie mentioned, and all the other Gospels. So So it's very interesting when you start looking at what was included and what was excluded. And the one determinant, that the mandate that was given these bishops when they were trying to decide what books to have in, what books to keep out, Constantine said, I don't really care what you conclude. What I care about is that your decision is unanimous, because I will have no infighting. And so the bishops unanimously decide, and then the books that they couldn't unanimously decide, they booted out. In some books, there were so much controversy over them, like the Book of Enoch, that they set them aside into what's known as the apocryphal books. And so that's the Apocrypha that you have. So let's see. They were willing to play swords for him, says Jeremy. Yeah, very true. I want to see if I'm missing anybody's important comments here as I've been going on. So what you had take place, I believe, was Jesus started standing against the religious system of the day. Small as it may have been, when you think of that encapsulated, this is in Jerusalem, and this is in Judea, and the ruling class of priests and the high council, if you will, the Sanhedrin. It was a theocracy. It was government by religion. And of course, they had their king, their puppet king, who was Herod's son or grandson at this point, that when they took Jesus during his trial to Herod. And Herod mocked him, but Herod questioned him first. And then they sent him to Pilate. What's Pilate now? Here's the deal. So what you've got is the Sanhedrin saying, this guy's disrupting the flow of money into the temple. This is the second time he's done it. He's pulling the people to worship him. Well, picture, if you will, think of the Taliban in Iraq, or the ruling religious class in Iraq or Iran. And this is what you've got, I think, with the Sanhedrin. Very similar in that you obeyed the laws of the temple of the Jewish religion, or you could end up dead. Well, here's Jesus totally turning it on its ear. Now imagine if somebody in, say, Iran started a movement and had a huge following of people, and he was performing miracles and all of this, but was disrupting the flow of money to the Taliban, to the ruling class. What do you think the response would be? They might question him. Are you real? Are you from God? But for the most part, what they would do is defend their system of belief and worship. And so, I'm eating ham is Easter tradition against the Old Testament. Eating ham is an Easter tradition against the Old Testament. I think, old Levitical law was supposedly wiped out with Jesus. But then again, Jesus said, I am not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. That's interesting. So I think, this is where you've got ruling classes like the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all of these guys, that they were upholding all the man-made laws on top of it. The Mosaic law didn't end at 10 commandments. There were all these different things that they had to do to prove that show the world they were a peculiar people. You talk about not eating ham as coming from an unclean animal in Judaism. Well, they also couldn't do things like, there was a command that said, it's in the book of Leviticus, men couldn't shave the corners of their beards like this. I shaved off the corner of my beard. You couldn't do that if you were a Jew. That's why they all had the big beards, And so there was all kinds of Levitical law. So Jesus came disrupting the system, saying, I am telling you that you guys have it wrong. He's telling the Sanhedrin. So I'm from the Father. I can tell you this. And I speak with some authority. Well, he disrupted the money. Getting back to the original question, what did he do to deserve to die? He disrupted the money system. He disrupted the worship. And they wanted him gone. The only problem the Sanhedrin had was under Roman rule, they could not condemn him to death. They could not put him to death without the permission, an explicit writ of execution from the Roman governor. That's the only way they could execute somebody. So hence, therefore, this is why you have Pilate enter the picture. Why were the Romans crucifying Jesus at all? It's because they needed Roman permission to do it. And there's an interesting thing, and we talked about this once many months ago. What was the Sicarii Matt Finn brings up? The Jewish assassins. They believe that, remember the Barabbas story? Give us Barabbas. He was a murderer. He was supposedly supposed to have been one of the Sicarii. And the Sicarii were the long daggers, skinny long daggers that they would hide in their cloaks. And the zealots, the rebels against Rome, they would they'd assassinate and they'd kill. And, it was under stealth, they didn't come out and openly have war with the Roman soldiers. They would kill the Romans. And the Sicarii were the knives they used. I just happened to see that. And so, they were the Jewish assassins at the time. And it's thought that Barabbas was one of them. And so with Jesus, they're wanting this writ of execution, the Sanhedrin. But they can't get a writ of execution unless the Roman governor signs off. And the Roman governor just happened to be in Jerusalem that week because it was Passover week. So he has a legion, I don't know if it was a legion or a whatever it was at the Antonium there, all the soldiers there to, keep the peace, make sure there's no chaos during Passover. And it was his custom during Passover to turn over one prisoner, to exonerate him, to pardon one prisoner that was going to be put to death. That was the tradition according to the scriptural story. So what does the Sanhedrin do? They take Jesus into Pilate. Pontius Pilate, this part of the story. And they need Pilate to give them a writ of execution. Pilate says, what for? What's your case? He asks the Sanhedrin. Well, he has blasphemed by equating himself with God. And Pilate's pretty much like, I don't really give a flying rat's ass about blasphemy. I'm not going to give you a writ of execution. And he says, but bring him in, I'll examine him. And so they bring him before Pilate. Pilate asks him questions. Remember, what does Jesus do? He doesn't say anything. And you remember that scene, and we've talked about this before. Pilate asks questions. He asks Jesus, finally, he says, why aren't you answering my questions? He says, don't you know that I have the power to execute you or the power to set you free? And the account says, Jesus said to him, you would have no power at all against me except it were given you from my Father in heaven. And he expressed to him that his kingdom is of the heart. And it was said from that moment on, Pilate sought to release him. And he was like, he says to the Sanhedrin, basically, F off. I don't see any reason to execute him. You Jews are a pain in my ass. And this is what you can glean out of what he's saying. And he wouldn't give them a writ of execution. Well, then there's the whole story of Pilate's wife had a dream, and she comes to him and says, don't have anything to do with this Jesus of Nazareth, because he's from God. And Pilate still sought to release him. Well, then what does the Sanhedrin do? They pull a fast one, a political move on him. They say, if you won't give us a writ of execution, we're going to tell Caesar, Tiberius Caesar, back in Rome, we're going to tell him that you honor another king, because it's Jesus is declaring that he's king of the Jews. And we, the Sanhedrin, we only worship, we only have one king, and that's Caesar. I mean, what a bunch of baloney that was. A bunch of hypocrites. They're saying they want Jesus put to death because he's a blasphemer. Now they're saying they want him put to death because he wants to be the king of the Jews, when the only king of the Jews is Caesar, who we honor, Caesar. The Sanhedrin hated Caesar. They wanted Roman rule gone. But now there's context to this statement. There's great context here. Pontius Pilate, was given his position as the governor, the procurator of Judea, by a man in the Roman government named L. Aelius Sejanus. Sejanus was the right-hand man of Caesar Tiberius. And as Caesar Tiberius was getting older, getting in his dotage, he went out to the Isle of Capri, which you can still go visit. His palace is at Capri, this gorgeous place on the Isle of Capri, off the coast of Italy, and was basically gone from government. In debauch, go rent the X-rated version of Caligula, and you'll get an idea what Tiberius was doing out on Capri. And probably with some embellishments, but there you go. And but he left in charge of the empire Sejanus, L. Aelius Sejanus. And Sejanus was pretty much setting up the government for when he was the Caesar to replace Caesar, kind of, what's the word you use? Not Caesar-elect, but he was the presumed that he was being groomed by Tiberius Caesar to become the next Caesar. But so was Caligula. So there was no decision made, and I'm pretty sure Sejanus was ready to take that power on himself. But along the way, Sejanus appointed Pontius Pilate to his prefecture in Judea. But then also along the way, Sejanus there was all these conspiracies, all this infighting all the time. Think of the seats of power. And he is executed by Tiberius Caesar for being a conspirator to try to rend the kingdom, the empire, from Caesar's hands. And of course, the other factions got Caesar believing this. And L. Aelius Sejanus and all of his family members are executed by strangulation. And about 300 of Sejanus's political allies are purged, killed, executed. Now, here is Pontius Pilate out in little backwater dust town Judea prefecture, who is an ally of Sejanus's. And Sejanus was very anti-Semitic, and he told Pilate, "You keep the Jews subdued." Pilate had 5 different rebellions of the Jews during his prefecture, if you didn't know this. He subdued different rebellions, some of them small, some of them big. Well, now after the death of Sejanus, Tiberius issues an edict that says, in Judea you will placate the Jews. I can almost imagine, this letter doesn't exist in history, but you wish you could find this. I imagine the letter to Pilate reading something like, "Your friend L. Aelius Sejanus is dead. I hear you're one of his allies. Better mind your P's and Q's over there in Judea. Oh, and by the way, whole policy with the Jews now, don't subdue them. Placate the Jews. Placate them. So here's Pontius Pilate with this whole new edict on how to handle Judea and the Jews. Now, here comes this little country itinerant rabbi that the Sanhedrin wants a death warrant for. We want to execute this guy. He's a blasphemer. And Pilate saying, get out of here. It's none of my, leave him be. Well, they start playing on his needing to placate the Jews. And they, of course, are the ruling system in Jerusalem, in Judea. Well, we'll tell Caesar that you're honoring a guy who's calling himself the king of the Jews. Caesar's the only king of the Jews. That's how badly they wanted this guy dead. And so what you see is the Sanhedrin playing on something they knew very well, that Caesar had told Pilate to placate the Jews. Go along with the Sanhedrin. And if you don't, we're going to tell Caesar that you didn't obey his command. Well, what kind of hot water would that put Pilate in when he was an appointee of L. Aelius Sejanus? I think this is all the politics that were being played at the time to get the death warrant. And the death warrant was all over Jesus was disrupting the flow of money into the temple. And so Pilate, after careful consideration, on one hand, he lets Jesus go. He could be in hot water with Caesar and maybe would have been the most altruistic act of his career in his life, because it may have ended his life, because he may have been recalled and executed along with other appointees of Sejanus. Precipitated by what the trouble the Sanhedrin would cause for him. So the Sanhedrin basically has him by the nuts. And they say, you give us this writ of execution, or we'll just tell Caesar that you let this guy go. And he says he's a king. And so what does Pilate do? Remember? It says he washes his hands. He calls for a bowl of water, and he ceremonially washes his hands of it. I'm done. My hands are clean. I'll give you your writ of execution. You take him and execute him. And so I think it was a combination of the temple guard and the Roman soldiers that executed him by crucifixion. And so there you go. There's the long roundabout answer to the question I posed a while ago. Who killed Jesus? Why'd they kill him? Some people will say, well, it's anti-Semitic to say the Jews killed him. It was the Romans who killed him. Well, maybe technically, but it was the Jewish ruling. I don't think that's any reason to be anti-Semitic. That's just a fact of history. History is amoral. I think the fact of history is that the Jews, the ruling council of the Jews, the ruling body, the Sanhedrin, wanted Jesus put to death, and they got it. So I don't think it matters who did it. It's the idea, at least theologically, was there. So there you go. Yeah, we all wash our hands well. Passover. Yeah. And so, what'd you say here, Gary? That goes to show you that legalese language bullshit goes all the way back to the time of Jesus. So probably and long before. So, yeah, this is why he was put to death. It wasn't because he was the Son of God. And do you think if the Sanhedrin or the Romans believed he was the Son of God, they would have executed him? No. So, I know there are also some speculations that Pontius Pilate went on to accept Christianity. You remember when he asked Jesus, he said, Jesus said something about the truth, and Pilate says, what is truth? He was stating a philosophy, an actual philosophy that existed in Rome, one of the forms of philosophical worship. And I can't remember what they were called off the top of my head, but their saying was, "What is truth? What is truth?" So it's interesting. Jeremy says, was the Sanhedrin that he wrote in the sand about? No, the whole writing in the sand thing, that was it may have involved some members of the Sanhedrin. But remember, that was the story where a bunch of pious guys, probably members of the Sanhedrin, dragged a woman in front of Jesus one day and said, "We caught her in the act of adultery. What do you do? Shall we condemn her? Shall we stone her to death?" And it said that's where it says, and Jesus stooped down and he started writing in the sand, almost like he was dismissing them, not paying attention. It's been speculated that he was writing the sins of these individual men. I don't know that. The story doesn't say that. But it says one by one they all left. Because Jesus, after writing in the sand, it says he stood up and he said, the famous saying, "Let he who is without sin among you cast the first stone." And one by one they all left. Now, what was very interesting about that story, by the way, you notice they have the woman that they caught in adultery. What shall we do to her? Should we stone her? Where's the guy? If they caught her in the very act, as it said, why isn't the guy being dragged in front of Jesus too? Double standard, maybe? Setup, maybe? So, interesting story. That's where the writing in the sand came from, Jeremy. So, yeah, history has been anything but godly. You're right, Leslie. So there's our little story for today about this is I love the history of this stuff. I think these things really happened. They could lead one to salvific knowledge, to say, I have to accept that Jesus is the Savior. Salvation, salvific. That these things are true. They could also just be history. Who was Jesus really? Was he the Son of God? Was he a son of God? Was he just a great prophet? Not even a prophet, a teacher. Those are the questions you have to ask. What we do know is that his followers, over the next couple of 100 years, started quite a religious movement in his name. So, there you go. All right. We're so smart sometimes. You guys are, I mean. Thanks, Corwin. Or Corin. Let's see. Yeah, lame duck Caesar. Pilate was a people pleaser who just wanted this to go away in the easiest way possible. Yeah, Matt, I think so. He was a politician. I'm not sure I would label him as a people pleaser. I think he was probably somebody who was in charge, knew he was in charge, and told these guys looking for a writ of execution, go away. I'm not doing that for you. I see more attitude in it than that, but that's my interpretation of him. My interpretation of him is that he knew what he was doing, but at the same time, the political games were being played. Why did everybody pull out of the Democratic elections and get behind Biden? Why did strong people who believed on the Democratic side of things in our own political elections here, why did they pull out, and why did Bernie pull out? It's because the establishment is supporting Biden, when Biden is probably the worst candidate they have. Well, not because, and then let me make this clear, I feel bad for Joe Biden. I don't think he wanted to run. I think he got pulled into it. I think he was convinced he needed to do it. I think over the year now, he has declined in mental health. That's the way dementia works. And I don't say that to be damning of him or anything. Like I say, I feel bad for the guy because I think he is not in good enough shape to run for office. At the same time, and I've mentioned this before, when his son died, what was it, 3 years ago? Maybe more than that? 3 or 4 years ago? I think wasn't he still in office as vice president? His son died. I think the fire went out of his belly. I think he wanted nothing more than for his term to be over, and I'm going home. I'm just going to retire. I'm out of this BS. And I think that's why you didn't see him declaring right away. I think he was done. I think that his son's death hit him. It kicked the air out of him. And as it would me or anybody here. And he's getting older. And so I think he got pulled into this thing. And I think I'll bet you there are nights he lays in bed and go, why the hell did I do this? I don't think he wants to be there. So why did bringing it back to our question of somebody like Pilate? I think he had his political hand forced. And could he have stood up and said, no, I'm not going to execute this guy? But see, to Pilate, remember in context of the day, Jesus was just another guy. He wasn't a big political leader. He wasn't the Son of God. He wasn't the King of the Jews. He wasn't any of those things. He was a religious teacher, according to the Roman governor. I don't think he even knew who he was when he was brought before him. His wife had heard of him, had Pilate. Did Pilate know much about him? We don't even know. So he's got this, the Sanhedrin are calling this upstart little itinerant rabbi who they don't like what he's teaching, so they want him put to death. And Pilate's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And it wasn't until they pulled all the political machinations that Pilate was like, well, okay, here you go. I'm done. I'm out. So that's my take on him. Matt, that's what I think happened. That's what I think was going on. So let's see. The bright side of dementia is you can find the eggs you hid. You can find the eggs you hid, real or not. Nice. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, I feel bad for Joe Biden. I really do. I don't care what everybody says about Creepy Joe, and maybe those things are true. And a lot of that didn't come out until he started running for office again. So I take that stuff and I put it over here. I always thought through the years, Joe Biden always was one of those guys of a different political persuasion than I was. He was on the left. He was a Democrat. That I respected because he seemed to be common sensed, even though I didn't always agree with him. He seemed to be a good man in government. Now we know there's lots of things that change over the years, but I think, and that's an overall, I'm glossing over things when I say that. So I see Joe Biden as somebody who probably really doesn't want to be there. And he's being driven by the machine right now. So, yeah, he's a puppet within the DNC. Exactly. You said driven by the machine. Matt said he's a puppet of the DNC pulling the strings. Exactly. Yeah, there is a criminal referral against Biden now for his intern. And of course, I mentioned that to somebody, not because I'm out being smug, but I hear people going, they're all talking about, well, President Trump, said he would grab a woman by the pussy and all of this. And, they keep bringing that up. And it's like, dudes, you do realize it's almost 20 years ago he said that. And he didn't do that. He was locker room talking with someone. Being a dick, maybe, yeah. Being a billionaire playboy, not in government office, for sure. But I brought up, well, if you're going to bring up all that stuff about Trump, which has all been gone through ad infinitum, I said, what about Joe Biden? Doesn't he have 7 people now accusing him, and there's a criminal indictment against him? And they go, oh, that's just politics. It's like the whole Alyssa Milano thing, all about the Me Too movement. Oh, until it affects her candidate, then it's different. It's different. Women are to be believed when they make accusations. Oh, unless they make an accusation against my candidate. So, anyway, yeah, that's the same kind of stuff that was going on in first century Judea. So, yeah, it was, Leslie. It was proven that many of the accusations against Trump were lies. This is very true. All right, here's something I'm going to do. Since I am so mentally out of it, I'm going to do one reading, and I'm going to make it a general reading. It's not for anybody specific here. And my cards have been moved since I've got a scanner sitting over here. My cards were sitting on top of it. Oh, there. Somebody used the scanner. There they are. I'm going to do a general reading for us today. Yeah, pay attention to who Biden picks as his VP. If Biden wins the election, says Audrey, he would step aside for the VP. Well, here's what my thinking is on that. And Rocky and I talked about this in the Situation Room last week, is that I think he will diminish and give the vice president a lot of power. Look at all the changes they're trying to make right now. All the changes being proposed. I don't think they think he's either going to die in office or he's going to be declared unfit after he gets in office. Yeah, I think that's the deviousness of this. So yeah, watch who he picks for a vice president. So, all right, I'm going to do a single reading, and what I'm going to focus on, since I don't have a lot of focus this morning, I don't feel that it's responsible of me to do a reading for anybody in particular this morning. So I'm going to do just a general reading, 3-card reading. No, let's do a 1-card reading. Let's do a 1-card reading this morning of how do I want to put this? Guys, put some energy into this out there in the chat room and in your minds. What do you want to know? What do you think we should know? And we'll pull 1 card and see what we get. This is for all of us in general. It's not going to deal with specifics, but let me shuffle up here. Just kind of put your energy into thinking about this. Let's see what we get. Stability of humanity. There's a good one. Let's go one more time. I've never been one to do prognostications or predictions for humanity. You know, I look at Jennifer Roberts as somebody who's got that ability to do that. And other people I know, astronomers, watch the stars and the planets and know all this junk that I don't know. But let's just look at this and see what's in store for us. Now, I happen to think that we are approaching the end of this nonsense. Only in the sense that if I look at it astronomically, when we had Jeff Harmon on, he predicted the 3rd week of April as being the week when we move out of this, I don't even know what they call it, this cycle that we're in with the planets. And there's going to be almost immediate dramatic change. You looked out to June and saying, June, there's dramatic change for the better. So let's see what happens. But we're at April, what are we, on the 10th? What is today? The 12th. So maybe a couple of more weeks of this. Is it going to get worse? Don't know. How soon will it get better? Don't know. Should we open the economy back up? Maybe. Will that make things worse? Don't know. Is the whole coronavirus thing over the top? Don't know for sure. We know people have died from it. We also know deaths are being attributed to it. Nobody dies in the last 2 weeks without being coronavirus. Whereas we lost thousands of people a day, every day of our lives. So, not asking specific on any of those, but the prosperity of our families. Yeah. How's this all going to go for us? All right. I'm going to cut the cards. I've shuffled them many times. I'm going to pull one card. We're going to see where we're at. Okay, you guys ready? Let's see what we get here. Here's the card I get. It's the Two of Swords. You know what the Two of Swords is about? The Two of Swords is about indecisiveness. It's about needing to break the indecision in order to proceed forward. Two of Swords. Swords is the suit of conflict. Conflict we give, conflict we get. It's a suit. It's the suit of taking and grasping the sword in your own hand and taking on the authority and the power. So the Two of Swords, yeah, lucky numbers don't lie. But the liars manipulate the numbers. Very true. And what are the numbers? What are the real numbers? We don't know. I keep hearing, by the way, how the United States we've exceeded Italy in number of deaths. Yeah, individual deaths. But remember, Italy has 60 million people. The United States has 5 times that amount. We have 326 million people. So there's going to be a percentage that skews very differently. So it all depends on how you look at the numbers. But the Two of Swords, this is one that cautions us all against being indecisive. Indecisiveness is what holds you up. And you have to break the indecisiveness and sometimes maybe even take a path that doesn't look like the path you think is the best way to go. But it's the path that you have to be on. You have to be honest with yourself. And you have to be honest with your past. It's the crossed blades on this. If you look at this, the swords represent balance of forces, and it's crossed in front of us. It's not really the absence of a struggle, but it's an equal distribution of force type of opposition, meaning both options look all right, or both options look equally bad. And it might indicate a position to mediate a conflict. We're caught in the middle of a dilemma with no clear outcome. That's what the card means, folks. The resolution of this state is what will be the only thing that brings peace. And there's a conflict that locks up our energies right now. That's what this card means. Here, you know what I'm going to do? Just so you know, I don't make this stuff up off the top of my head. Let's go look at a tarot interpretation of the Two of Swords. All right. Two of Swords. Let's see if we can find a good site here. Let's see what they have to say here. This says, at first glance, the Two of Swords may seem like a sad, ominous card, pointing at one's emotional failures in life. I'm just reading through this. This is one of those sing-songy sites I think I pulled up here. After all, who would like to shield herself with two diagonal swords? Wear a blindfold and a gray dress, which is not how this guy is dressed. The swords represent thoughts and mind, according to this website. The person with the swords, carrying two swords in opposing directions, has conflicting thoughts about a situation, wants to listen to her mind and not her heart, so on, has to be decisive. It's a card about breaking decisiveness. Let me see if there's another site here. Let's look at astrology.com. The Two of Swords. The meaning is the Two of Swords in Tarot stands for blocked emotions, avoidance, stalemate. How do you feel being quarantined? Or we're not technically quarantined. We're isolated, self-isolation, businesses being shut down, all of this. How do you feel about all of that? You feel like we're in a stalemate? The Two of Swords, and we don't know which way it's going. That's a stalemate, folks. The Two of Swords in the Tarot is one of balancing hard choices and making difficult decisions. The card symbolizes, I just had a pop-up on this website, symbolizes the woman's struggle to keep her, usually it's a woman that's standing with the two swords. The person in the card, their struggle to keep their feelings within themselves and fend off outside approaches. And this card means that, I'm just going through a lot of fluff that's in the middle here. It can mean you're not willing to accept some truths about yourself or a situation that you might be involved in. It tells you that you have to put up barriers between yourself and others and within yourself. And you're behaving exactly like the figure on the Two of Swords card, where the person has put a barrier of swords across their heart. This is the time to stop avoiding the truth and pretending that all is well. This is the time to stop blocking off your internal emotions and refusing to feel them. This is the time to stop thinking in one direction and feeling in another. When you draw this card, stop to think what you're really feeling. Are you resisting because you think you might get hurt? Are you furious internally, even though you're outwardly smiling? Are you putting up barriers and fronts, which aren't really the solution? And the solution comes once you face the truth, or even just acknowledge that there is a truth that exists that is above the possible troubles you might be experiencing. So there you go. That's what some of the websites say. So the swords, indecisive, you have to break the mode of indecisiveness. So however you are being, this isn't saying which way is the right way. It's just saying we're all in this state of stasis. What's right? What's wrong? What's true? What's false? And we have to decide. So you have to decide. It's like being offered two crossroads and don't know which one to take. Well, sometimes you just have to take one and go. So there you go, folks. I think that card says that we're all feeling locked up right now to a certain degree. And that's probably very true. And that we have to get in touch with what we know to be truth. So there you go, folks. What else we got here? What's everybody saying? Teresa says you feel dirty, like you have to make a deal with the damn devil. Yeah. Let's see what else we got. Bernard says, "Bam bam, right? You hit me. I love to row. I true look for you, but I'm half blocked, half fed, crazy at my childhood wounds. But my phone is special for me because, bam, Scotty, I'm so indecisive." Yeah, we all are to a certain degree, Bernard. We're indecisive. I could tell you how to be decisive, but does that mean I really know that for myself? It's easy to tell other people how to be decisive. It's tougher when the decision is on us. I think this is saying nationally, we don't really know what's going on. We have an idea of directions we have to go. We've got the president saying, let's get these markets open back up. Let's get business rolling. How long do you stay sequestered is the question. How deadly is the virus really? And if we get things going again, well, it just put us in deeper trouble. These are all questions to ask. So we'll leave it at that. Go out into your week and be decisive about what you want. Don't flail like a torn banner in the wind. Know what you believe and know where you want to be. And right now we're feeling indecisive, but I think the answers are going to come soon. Don't live in fear. Live in common sense. All right. Yeah, risks are a part of life. At what cost is the mitigation? Yeah, that's still brought back to the famous Captain Kirk lines from the old series, "Risk is our business." And so, all right, folks. I want spring too. And while my curtains are not open, it looks, there's a little crack at top and a very white light coming in. So, yeah, they say up to 13 inches of snow here after yesterday's 70 degrees in the sun. So I guess we're paying for that day. But it's spring, so it'll melt fast. It's going to be in the 50s all week. So, all right, guys. I want to thank you for being here. Remember, every night this week, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. For the Intrepid radio program. That's 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is 10 p.m. out east, 7 p.m. out west, right in the middle, 8 p.m. in Mountain Time. So have some interesting topics that we're going to keep covering, and I think some good stuff. Also be on with Rocky Stucci in the Situation Room. I don't know if we're going mornings or evenings this week. I don't know if Rocky's still in the room. If he is, maybe he can tell us. Oh, wait, I think he's got the week off, but I'm not positive of that. If he has the week off, I think we're going late mornings, but we'll find out. You'll see the announcements. So I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for all you do. If you need a tarot reading, contact me. You know I'm out there. So I hope all goes well for you. I hope everybody gets some of the relief that, frankly, I've had people say, I suppose because you're a conservative, you're going to send your check back. I'm like, hell no. You know what? I paid for that check with my taxes. So I got no problem with it in a crisis. So I hope you get what has been set aside for you. And there you go. That's all there is to it. Thanks for being here, folks. It's now 10:37, which is 11:37 out east. Hour behind me in the mountains, 2 hours behind me in California in the West Coast. So thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow night. You guys have a good day. Hopefully it's not snowing too badly where you are. And love you all. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.